What is a fact that you think sounds completely false and that makes you angry that it's true? The platypus sweats milk, as it lacks nipples. Weirdest fucking animal FFS. God messed up. He accidentally created an oviparous, venomous, milk-sweating, duck-billed, electrical current-inducing, mammary nipple-less mammal, instead of a horse with a horn. If it's cold, does it sweat ice cream? Yes. Source: I own a chain of ice cream parlors that exclusively uses platypus sweat. I was talking to my mum about bees one day and telling her where queen bees come from. Basically, they start out as a normal bee larvae, but the worker bees feed it special royal jelly that makes it grow into a queen bee, and as the words came out of my mouth I realized how fake it sounded. My mum didn't believe me and I had to Google it later to prove it to her. It's actually not the royal jelly that makes a queen. It's the lack of bee bread. Yes. They also went with that name. Are both you guys joshing me? I have some investigating to do. The pronunciations of Kansas and Arkansas are not at all similar. I'm Aussie, so I haven't heard Arkansas said out loud often. I was old AF before I learned how it's actually said. Am British. Thought Arkansas and Arkansas were two different states for far too long. Until as early as the 1980s. Newborns were not given pain medicine during surgery. Only muscle relaxant, as it was falsely accepted they could not feel pain. Imagine going through the pain of a surgery but unable to move due to a muscle relaxant. I cut the tip of my middle finger almost off when I was 4. They gave me nothing for pain. No meds at all, but strapped me down whilst they stitched it back up. Trust me. It was traumatic. I've never screamed more in my life, and the scariest part was the adults just not caring or even acknowledging this traumatized child in pain and scared. I was begging them to stop screaming until I lost my voice. They just talked to each other and ignored me. Horrific memory. I had a pilonidal cyst in my early 20s. It was so huge the doctor couldn't close me up. I had an open wound packed with gauze and a nurse who came to my house every day to change it. The day after the surgery, she pulls the gauze out of the wound and immediately says, "Uh-oh." I ask her what's going on and she says we need to go to the hospital immediately. It turns out the doctor had nicked a blood vessel during the surgery and it wasn't caught until the nurse changed the dressing. The doctor who did the surgery just happened to be on her rounds when I went in, and he stitched up the nicked blood vessel without any anesthesia. Pretty much anything to do with naked mole rats. They are neither related to moles nor rats. They can use their teeth like chopsticks. They have the social hierarchy of bees. And oh yeah, they are cold-blooded. They're also almost entirely resistant to cancer. Scientists tried to force a bunch of them to develop cancer and only like 2 actually ended up with cancer. Imagine being born naturally resistant to cancer. Just to have some very smart people working together to give it to you anyways. I have a hard time trying to picture what forcing to get cancer looks like. And, on rare occasions, they help teen superheroes and eat nachos. Also, mortality rate is basically constant for all ages. That means aging doesn't kill them. That means they're immortal. Walmart is world's largest retailer of diamonds. Ha 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 ha. I think it was Teen Mom season 1 or 2 when the guy went to Walmart and picked out a ring to use to propose with. The lady just looked emotionless. And when the total came up it was like $39. Ha. That was Gary buying a ring for Amber in season 1. The total came to $21.40 after taxes. Surprisingly, he is now super well adjusted. Is a great dad and has had custody of their child her whole life, and Amber is a loser who never gets out of bed. From 1719 to 1721, prisoners in Paris were given their freedom if they agreed to marry a prostitute and move to Louisiana. Explains a lot about Louisiana. I am not from the US. What's about Louisiana you are talking about? Genuine question. It's the state that the city of New Orleans is in. They have an area called the French Quarter. And French language has a very heavy influence there. It's also the perceived home of Mardi Gras. And is considered a wild party town. If you saw Princess and the Frog recent Disney one, that's Louisiana. Before the new French were sent to Louisiana, France sent all the prostitutes and young female prisoners to Quebec to be married off to the abundance of male settlers. There's a lot of romance around the filles du roi, but in a modern lens it just sounds like indentured servitude rape edition. That's not completely accurate though. Les filles du roi, translated to daughters of the king, were not prostitutes and prisoners. They were mostly orphans and poor women that the king gave a dowry to go marry people in New France. It is hard to argue that the choice they were given wasn't really a choice and that it is defiantly indentured servitude. But to say that they were prostitutes and prisoners is a myth. The millionaire heir to the fortune of the American chemical company DuPont, Robert H. Richards, has avoided prison after raping his 3-year-old daughter because a judge considered he wouldn't fare well in prison. The fuck? Oh, this is the worst one by far. WTF WTF WTF. Additional question: how do you only get 8 years for raping a 3-year-old? All crisps, chips for any Americans, in the UK go out of date on a Saturday. It annoys me because a smug friend pointed it out and I have been unsuccessful in proving him wrong. I had to Google this and found this from Walker's. In the manufacturing sites we work on production weeks which start on a Sunday. All product produced in that week will have the same best before date. As the week ends on the Saturday, the best before date will always end on a Saturday. The fact you can sneeze and/or cough so hard you can break a rib. Like how? Why? I dislocated my rib from coughing when I had the flu. Then it popped back in after a particularly powerful sneeze. Get your flu shot, kids. This made my chest hurt. Well, if your body's options are A, suffocate in a few minutes because your airway is obstructed, or B, maybe don't die in the next 5 minutes but have fun for the next few months with a broken rib. IDK option B sounds better. Suicide Squad has won more Oscars than The Shawshank Redemption. There are more privately owned tigers in Texas than there are wild tigers on the rest of the planet combined. Isn't that because Texas has super lax exotic pet laws? I could be wrong, but there was an episode of Castle where hillbillies, rednecks, bred tigers in Texas to then ship to wealthy customers. There's also numerous zoos as well as shelters for rescued exotic pets. The government pays Microsoft to keep Windows XP running cause the government uses Windows XP a lot. A lot of trains where I live, Brisbane, run Win95 still. That explains a lot. I think that's mostly because a lot of systems are only ever down when they're broken. And to update the OS would require updating everything that runs on that OS, which most workers don't want to do. It's a problem for a lot of companies unless someone in charge tells everyone they're upgrading and forces them to. That the capybara is so useless that its main defense is to stand still and wait to be eaten. It's basically a vegetable made from meat. But why does it befriend so many other species? Can't have natural predators if you befriend them. Yo, talking about capybaras. I thought they were great animals and were definitely my favorites at the local animal sanctuary. However, I helped out one day cleaning up all the animal shelters, etc. And they have one capybara who is completely separated from the rest. Thought it was weird, so I asked why he is all alone. Turns out they put him together with other animals, and other capybara, and every morning there would be animals with several bites, several dead capybaras, etc. And they couldn't figure out what the fuck was wrong. They placed a night camera and turns out the capybara that is now separated was the goddamn problem. He murdered them. Absolute psycho. Solitary confinement for that serial murderer capybara. That crocodiles can climb trees. Did not want to know this. Thanks. But here's some more about them for you. They, or alligators. Honestly no idea which. Can live for an indeterminate amount of time. Basically. They just keep growing and die because their body can't deal with it and fails. Not due to age. Lobsters too. Bananas are berries but strawberries are not berries. Raspberries. Blackberries and boysenberries are also not berries. It's more that bananas are berries that's pissaring me off honestly. Chuck and Halle are berries though. Avocados are also berries. So guacamole is berry dip. If you mix water and sawdust and freeze it, the resulting ice melts extremely slowly. Like weeks at room temperature, slowly. Slightly nuttier, they wanted to build a giant aircraft carrier in World War II out of this stuff. And park it in the Atlantic. Would supposedly be very torpedo, weapon resistant. As they could just refreeze chunks that were blown out. Yep, called Project Habakkuk. Though spearheaded by the UK and prototyped in Canada near the end of World War II. Research ultimately confirmed that a full-size ice picrete vessel would cost more money and machinery than a whole fleet of conventional aircraft carriers. British promoters of Habakkuk were so intimidated by Prime Minister Churchill that they kept this information from him until the Canadians visited the UK to report on the project. Additionally, other complicating factors were cited, including that the demand for steel for other purposes was too great. To the project's credit, *, it took 3 hot summers to completely melt the prototype constructed in Canada, *. We used to saw and chop firewood for the house in the winters, and there were always these stupid chunks of sawdust ice hanging around well into the spring when all the rest had melted. Now I know why. Thanks.